Yes, I only read one book in 2021, and it was this stinky book. What up? I'm Sam, and there's quite literally no one asking me to do this, but I'm a Taurus, so kind of comes with the territory that I am an opinionated gal. And I also feel compelled to share my opinions unsolicited. So today I feel compelled to tell you about what I read in 2021, even if it is almost 2 months late. So I guess where I'll start is this is sort of related, but basically it's why I started this channel. Why do I feel compelled to to scream into the void what I think about the books that I read and the books that I own. So I guess if you really don't care about this, which, hey, no shame. This video is honestly just going to be a review of the book Cows by Matthew Stokoe. So if you're more interested in that and you care less about why I started the channel, although I will say it does tie in. But yeah, if you're not interested in that, you can just skip ahead to the timestamp of when I start the review for Cows. But okay, so just come with me on a short journey, and then we'll talk about Cows. So in middle school and high school, I had a lot of free time to read, and I liked reading. But then, you go to college, and in undergrad, I went to a small Lutheran liberal arts school. So yeah, I had to read a lot about Christian traditions, philosophy, and I also had a class that explored the relationship between science and religion, which was actually pretty interesting. But as an undergrad, I was really interested in science, and any non-science texts that I had to read were more so just like, I'd rather be reading something for fun because I know that this isn't what I want to do. This isn't what I feel called to do, That's my way of saying that I didn't do a lot of reading for fun in college. It was all stuff for school and it felt like a chore. And again, my Taurus sun coming out, I don't like to be told what to do. So as soon as you tell me to read something, it's like it sucks the joy out of it because it's like, well, even if I had wanted to read it, now I don't want to because you told me to. So now, as a PhD student in the hard sciences, I have to read a lot of scientific literature, which is obviously interesting to me, but it's a really different type of reading. And it feels like work. There is the occasional paper that's like, wow, this is super interesting and exciting. But for the most part, it's just like work. So it took me a while to get back into reading for fun in my free time just because I have to read so much for my day-to-day, for my work. So because I had such a break from hobby reading between high school and now, I still haven't really figured out what kind of adult books I even like. Because obviously in, middle school, high school, I did read some adult texts, but for the most part it was young adult fiction. And now that just doesn't hold my attention. It doesn't appeal to me. So I'm honestly not really even sure what I like to read. But one thing I knew when I embarked on this sort of like getting back into reading journey is that I like horror. That's a genre I really like. I've always really liked. So coming back into reading and thinking, oh, now I'm an adult. I can handle anything. Throw whatever you got at me. I can handle it. I immediately just went towards like the most disturbing books ever. And that's pretty much how I ended up in this mess. So now on to the review of Cows by Matthew Stokoe. So for those of you who have not heard of this book before, honestly, you should be glad. This was unlike any other reading experience I've ever had in my life. I don't even really know how to describe this book. The short synopsis of this is that the main character is a man named Stephen, and he's a really depraved character. He lives with his mother, who is another depraved character. And you join him at the beginning of this book. He's just starting a new job at a slaughterhouse. So I went into this thinking that the horror and sort of like the most disturbing aspects of it were going to be animal cruelty and horrific things to do with mistreatment of animals. And honestly, that was my hope, but I could not have been more wrong. I think the instances of animal abuse and animal cruelty were the mildest part of this book. And it's not fun to read. This is the only book I've ever read where I physically gagged while reading it. and that I've never had such a visceral response to a book before. It's like my body was physically rejecting this book, which was a new experience for me. I have not been able to stop thinking about this book since I read it. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing in this case. I will not recommend it to anyone. This video is really like a cautionary tale. And I am afraid some of you are going to be like, I bet I can handle it. I bet it's not that bad. And it's going to like intrigue you more. But like, honestly, this is just like, I can't recommend this book. I regret reading it and I wish I could erase it from my brain. Obviously, amongst all of the garbage, amongst all of the corrosive to my brain sentences that I had to read, some of the lines were very beautiful. And I'm a very plot-driven reader. My dummy brain is like, plot, what's going to happen next? You know, it's like I have to sometimes go back and reread sentences because I'll just jump right over them because I'm so eager to just know what's going to happen. So for me to stop and notice language and sort of take pause because something about the language stood out to me, that's really a testament to their writing. But then the more I think about it, I'm kind of wondering, is the writing actually good? Like, are those beautiful lines actually beautiful? Or is it just because those sentences were such a reprieve from all of the garbage that was entering my eyeballs leading up to that? Were these lines objectively beautiful, or were they just like an oasis for my brain? And the reason I stopped and paused on them was because I was like, I don't want to read the next sentence because I know that this could be the one last good sentence for a while. And then we're back slogging in the trenches, you know? So definitely take that, you know, with a caveat. I don't know if the lines are objectively good, but I think the writing is good. And I think that those lines, even if they aren't objectively good, what they are causing me to now think about and consider is, I think, valuable in and of itself. But yeah, anytime I stumbled onto one of those nice sentences, one of those beautiful sentences, it's like I couldn't help but thinking like, Jesus, Matt, what if we wrote something nice? Something that wasn't about people eating their own shit, you know? Wouldn't that be nice if we could just have a nice story about not awful things happening all the time? I definitely thought about DNFing this on several occasions, but I am also a reader that doesn't like to not finish things. I wouldn't say I'm a completionist necessarily, but I just don't feel like I can give a fair review of something if I haven't read it all the way through. Plus, it was like every time I thought about DNFing it, I was like, all right, you know, I sort of made it through this wave. There's no way it could get worse, is what I was thinking. But now, current Sam wishes I could go back to past Sam and say, no, you can DNF it. You should DNF it. In fact, just never start it. Just never start it. Just get rid of it. So when I finished this book, I immediately was like, get this shit away from my eyeballs, get it away. I like wanted to file a restraining order against this book. And I already had a little pile of books started that I was going to drop off at a little library in my neighborhood. So I added this to the pile and thought, yep, I'm just going to get rid of this immediately. But then I was like, oh my God, I cannot unleash this book on my neighborhood. You know, I can't drop this book off in good conscience into this little library for the next unsuspecting fool to pick up and potentially read. But then I was like, but I don't want to keep it, but how do I get rid of it? Then I thought about like writing a sticky note of warning and putting it inside the inside cover, being like, proceed with caution, content warnings, very disturbing, very extreme horror. But then I thought, okay, that's going to just intrigue them even more. How do I get rid of this in good conscience? So yeah, I was back and forth. How do I get rid of this? But I don't want it to fall into the wrong hands. And honestly, that's what it's like to live with an anxious brain. Just overthinking everything every second of every day. So what I've settled on is that I'm keeping this copy, not because I will ever reread it, but it's basically like imprisoned on my bookshelf now. And basically it's like in my hands, it'll do less harm than if I get rid of it and it falls into some kid's hands. It's like a curse I've bestowed upon my family. It's like I can never get rid of it and I just have to hand it down for generations to come, but then also tell them you cannot read it. My sister's fiance saw that I read this and he also enjoys extreme horror and he immediately was like, oh, I want to read it. I want to try it out. And I was like, don't read it. You can't read it. You do not have my permission to read this. nope, you can't read it. And if I see you reading it, I will rip it from your hands and I'll have another copy imprisoned on my bookshelf. Final thoughts. Obviously my first inclination was to give this 1 star because it's just so not fun to read. And it definitely bordered on, I'm just gonna write the most shocking shit I can think of, and all shock and no substance. So I was pretty set on 1 star, but then I just have not been able to stop thinking about this freaking book. It's like haunting me, and I obviously think that something that's able to elicit such a visceral response from me while reading, aka the physically gagging, is inherently valuable. So even though I'm traumatized by this book, I do think it has some merits. It's not total trash. It's just like mostly trash. Yeah, I ended up giving it 2 out of 5 stars. And if you watched my January wrap up, there were a couple YA books I gave 2 out of 5 stars to. The 2 out of 5 stars I gave this book is very different from the 2 out of 5 stars I gave those books. When I start a book, the rating always starts out in the middle, 2.5. And then as the book proceeds, if it's, good, it goes up. If it's bad, it goes down. And I try to wait a day or two after I finish a book for my thoughts to sort of settle before I decide on a rating. So I would say those YA books I talk about in my January wrap up were very forgettable characters and plots. I will not remember that a year from now, maybe even 6 months from now. So that's why I gave those a 2 out of 5. This is a 2 out of 5 that this book had to really scrap its way up to that 2 out of 5 because it quickly plummeted to a 0 out of 5 stars. And then it wasn't until I thought more about it and, like I said, was freaking haunted by this book that I honestly had no choice but to give it a 2 out of 5 because I just have not been able to stop thinking about it. And there are things that I think are inherently valuable about this book, but do not read it. Never read this book. It's awful. I regret reading it and I wish I could erase it from my brain. So yeah, that's my 2021 wrap up. This was the 1 book I read in 2021. What a loser. You freaking loser. So yeah, that's all I got for you today. Please never read Cows by Matthew Stokoe. If you have read it, let me know what you thought. I guess let me know if you agree. I can't imagine. I've never met anyone who is a Cows stan, but if you're a Cows stan, are you okay? Please contact a therapist and start going to regular sessions, please. You need it.